Okay, next question. Are the poor poor because they lack opportunities or because they are lazy? What reasons can you think of? So, this is another good question. Are poor people poor just because they don't have an opportunity, or is it because they're lazy? So, I think for the most part, it's because of opportunity. Um, Again, I've seen many people who work very hard, but when you have to spend all of your time just to grow food to provide for your house, it doesn't give you opportunities to improve very much. You're just getting enough food to survive, enough food for your children and your families to survive. So many of those people work many hours. They spend their times in the fields. I've been places where even they're sleeping in their fields at night, so animals won't come and eat their vegetables. So they have to stay out there all through the growing season. I've been there when they didn't have any food. They were eating literally grass, which doesn't taste very good. But they were eating things that they could collect from the environment because they didn't have food. But they had to work very hard even for that. Um, we call that kind of thing subsistence farming. Subsistence farming is when you're just growing enough to live. You have to grow your food to survive because you don't have money to go to a store and buy things that you need. So that's a very difficult life for people because when you think about that, if they only have enough money for food and they're growing that food themselves, if the situation comes when there's no rain and their food doesn't grow, what do? They don't have money to buy food. If their tools or machinery that they're using for farming or their animal that they're using for digging the dirt in the fields, we call that plowing the fields. If that animal dies or becomes sick or breaks a leg, then they don't have the money to buy another one or replace it or to take it to a vet to have it to have the vet try to heal it or try to cure its disease or sickness. So it puts a huge burden on them. In my opinion, most people who are poor aren't poor because of laziness. They're poor because they don't have opportunity to become educated or to have the types of machinery or equipment to improve their production. Because if they could say double or triple the amount of food they produce, then they could sell the extra food and begin slowly climbing their way out of poverty. So there's lots of reasons for it. But my experience isn't that they're lazy. Now, of course, there are lazy people in the world, and even in places where there are poor people, there are lazy people as well. So that's a possibility. That somebody could be lazy. But in general, they can't be lazy because if they don't work, they don't eat. So it's not something that they can afford to do unless they want to starve. So that's my perspective on it, and my experience. Next question. All right. Is it right for rich countries to have strict immigration controls? Well, I think first of all, as a country, we do have a right as countries to have some sort of control over who comes and goes into our country. I mean, I think we can see the events in recent decades. You have to be a little bit careful who comes into your country because they can create a lot of trouble. They can terrorists could come, criminals could come. So a country has a right to decide those sorts of things. I think they have sovereignty. Otherwise, what's the point of having countries? The whole world should just have no borders and we just go wherever we want, right? But as long as we have countries, there should be those rights and laws within a country to make those decisions. And a country is better able to decide as well, can they afford the immigrants? Can they financially support people who are coming who don't speak the language. And with not speaking the language, they don't have opportunities for work. Or maybe the country they're coming to doesn't have jobs for them. So even if they learn to speak the language, there's no place for them to find work. And so then they become a burden to the system, to the government, to the people, because the people support the system, right? So Americans pay, for the poor people who are in America or for the system. So if you bring more people, then that's more money that goes into the system. So it comes from people who are working. Now, having said that, I've met a lot of immigrants, both in America and in Europe. And I think most of them are coming out of a genuine desire to improve their life, to improve the lives of their families. They're not coming because they want to create trouble. And I'm talking even people from countries where we know there's people who are dangerous, right? Without naming any names. So most of them are coming just because they want a better life. And sometimes when they get there and maybe the system isn't capable of providing for them the way they thought it would, maybe they thought they would come and they would find work and they would become wealthy, or they would be able to support their families, or they have this dream, maybe things that they've seen in movies or TV or things they've heard, and then they get there and it doesn't materialize. Then maybe there's a situation where they become angry and they become maybe a problem in that situation. So that's another reason why I think governments do have a responsibility to think about those things, to think about how do we care for the people who come. Now, having said that, there's another case as well, which is refugees. There's economic refugees, which is kind of what I've been talking about. People who are coming because they're from poor countries and they want to rise out of the poverty. Again, in America, I'm more familiar with the system in America, but many of those who come to America, they will send money back to their home, to their family. So they will try to raise them and support them. And I've actually worked with many of them over the years because I've had jobs in different areas of the economy where they're working. And so I've seen them working, and they're very hardworking. And some of them are doing jobs that American people don't want to do anymore. Maybe because they're very hard jobs or very dirty jobs or things like that. And so I've seen them working. I see that they're hardworking. I have also seen the way that they interact because I've lived by them as well. We have millions of them in America. So I've had opportunities to see how they are with their family. Many of them have very strong families, good families. So I think it's important to recognize that they're not necessarily coming for bad reasons. But that other category that I was going to talk about is the people who are coming as refugees from war. And so they're not coming because of specifically economics, but they're coming because if they stay in their country, their life is in danger from others because of war, or maybe there's ethnic issues between groups of people. They're fighting with each other, things like that. And I've met people like that as well. Not in America, I haven't. Yeah, I have, but I'm not thinking about them. I'm thinking about a family that I met when I lived in Italy. They were from Syria, and they were from a region where ISIS, Islamic State, where they were in control. And I asked them, do you hope to return? If the war ends, do you hope to return to your country? And they said, if we go back, they will kill us. We can't go back. So they weren't planning on returning. They said it was very hard because their families were there. They had brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and moms and dads. So this family that I met was a husband, a wife, and 3 children. The youngest son and middle daughter lived with them, and they had an older daughter who was living in Germany. So she had learned German, and they spoke English, so that's why I spoke with them. But she was living in Germany and found a job there. She was college age or university age. So, but I think that we do have a responsibility for people like that. I don't think we just turn our backs on them and say, you know what, it's too bad that you're going to die if you go back to your country, but you just go. I mean, I think we do have a responsibility to care for people in that situation. And it doesn't have to be permanent. I mean, maybe at some point they do return to their country. But I think providing them with a safe place, providing them with food, with shelter, providing them with a degree of education, possibly they could integrate into our society in the future. I speak from an American perspective because most of us in America are immigrants, unless we're Native American, which there's only, I don't know, a few million. So most Americans came from another country, and they came as immigrants. And some of them came because of the things that I'm talking about here, because of wars or because of famine where they didn't have food. And they came to America. And so I imagine that my ancestors came for the same reason. Because if you're well off and you're rich, why would you leave the country that you're in? So there would be no point. So from that perspective, I think that it's important to care for people like that. But you have to have some sort of limit again, because if all of the third world moved to first world countries, the first world countries wouldn't be able to support them. It just wouldn't be possible. So, strict immigration controls, yeah. I mean, I think we should control who comes and goes. But I think it should be done with compassion. We shouldn't be sending people back to their death or things like that. So that's my perspective on it. All right.